Tonight, truckers upset with vaccine mandates roll their rigs into Ottawa.
I got a brief update this morning that they're covering all bases in regards to a timeline and time frame when it did happen.
Vandalism at a memorial to residential school survivors.
We have some younger populations who are slower to get to the booster.
And a doctor's word on why some communities are behind on booster shots. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. All eyes are on Ottawa as long-haul truckers make their way towards the nation's capital from all over the country. Dozens made their way through Kahnawake Mohawk Territory near Montreal, where they were met by banner-waving supporters. But as Lindsay Richardson reports, the convoy was smaller than expected.
With a couple hundred kilometers to go before reaching their final destination in Ottawa, the so-called Freedom Convoy made its way along Highway 132, the main highway thoroughfare bisecting Kahnawake Mohawk Territory, where community members have lined up along the highway shoulder to show their support for the rolling demonstration. The Quebec faction of truckers unhappy with a mandatory vaccine mandate began their trek early Friday morning, with gatherings reported at 3 Canada-U.S. border crossing sites: St. Théophile in Chaudière-Appalaches, Stansted in the Eastern Townships, and St. Bernard-de-la-Colle in the Montérégie.
We're being discriminated. We have to leave our jobs because we're not getting vaccinated. It's unscientific. And this is all political and it has nothing to do with health anymore.
But not all truckers agree with the show of force. In a statement, the Canadian Trucking Association said its members must, quote, adapt and comply with this mandate. Some trucks did display warrior flags as they posted up outside Parliament as early as Friday morning, but who was driving them is not known at this time. But due to a last-minute change of plans, Kahnawake Mohawk peacekeepers say Friday's drive-by was smaller than initially expected.
The original goal was to block intersections temporarily to allow the convoy to pass unobstructed. Maybe about 5 minutes before they were scheduled to arrive at 12:30, we received word that they had been rerouted to the Champlain Bridge, so they weren't going to be coming through Kahnawake. However, a small group of cars that were following the convoy, cars and pickup trucks, they came through the territory. It wasn't a very big convoy at all, and they were gone from the territory within a few minutes.
The Freedom Convoy, now estimated to be over 1,000 trucks strong, is expected to roll up to the nation's capital and to the Parliament buildings before the end of the day. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Kahnawake Mohawk Territory.
Thanks, Lindsay. That convoy has been gaining momentum as it travels through Ontario and the rest of Canada and starts arriving in Ottawa. Some trucks are already rolling into the nation's capital with major demonstrations to take place tomorrow. Local authorities say they don't have a confirmed number of protesters, but some estimates say thousands are expected. Meanwhile, Ottawa City Police are warning protesters that if they break the law, they will be prosecuted. They're also urging people to avoid downtown Ottawa and to expect major delays around the city.
It is simple. If you do not need to be downtown this weekend, avoid the area. For those of you who live downtown, expect delays and major traffic disruptions. Make adjustments to your schedule, whether it be for groceries, shopping, work, appointments, or deliveries. It will be more difficult to move around, especially by vehicle.
We'd like to hear what you think about the trucker convoy. Here's how you can continue the conversation. You can send your emails to news@aptn.ca. or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. More news out of Thunder Bay today, as the Thunder Bay Police Service's deputy chief has been suspended. The news was confirmed in a press release today by the Thunder Bay Police Services Board. Ryan Hughes has been suspended pending an internal investigation. The board said it is a human resources matter and would not be commenting further. The news comes on the heels of complaints filed by a member of the board and members of the service. Ontario's Solicitor General is also calling for an investigation into the chief and deputy chief of the Thunder Bay Police Service, as well as the administration of the city's Police Services Board. Now to BC, where a memorial that was set up to honor residential school survivors and their families has been vandalized. APTN's Tina House has more.
Here at the former St. Paul's Residential School in North Vancouver, this memorial is meant to honor survivors and those that didn't make it home. On January the 26th, 2022, it was discovered that someone had vandalized the male welcome figure at the memorial, and the Squamish Nation Integrated Police Unit and the RCMP are investigating. Squamish Nation Bound Councillor Wilson Williams says he was saddened to hear of what happened.
I got a brief update this morning that they're covering all bases in regards to a timeline and time frame when it did happen, and hopefully acquiring, if there's surveillance, or canvassing the area as well in regards to the possibility of who would have conducted such a violent and distressing act.
This post is all that remains of the right forearm of the male welcome figure. The arm was completely ripped off and is now missing. Along with the missing arm, smashed flower vases were scattered all around. Even more upsetting is that the destruction of the memorial happened just hours after the Williams Lake First Nation announced 93 potential hidden graves at the former St. Joseph's Mission Residential School.
We're also mindful of the triggerings of trauma within our community as well, and just being mindful of everything. You know, that is a possibility. That's something we'll leave up to the investigation.
If you know anything about the vandalism that took place at the memorial, you are asked to call the North Vancouver RCMP detachment. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Thanks, Tina. Parents and First Nations in the Yukon are rejoicing today. 7 schools in the territory will be joining a new First Nation school board. And as Sarah Connors tells us, many are hopeful the board will change education for the better. Here's that story.
The votes are in. After 2 weeks of referendums, 7 of 8 schools in the Yukon will be joining a new First Nations school board. Out of the territory's 29 schools, 8 held a vote to join the board. The board will give First Nations and communities greater control over education. It will also help improve Indigenous students' educational outcomes.
Just really excited, like just knowing that my daughter is going to be going to one of the schools. Put your arms up. Arms up.
Lauren Wallingham is a Notjonayaakdun First Nation citizen. She lives in Whitehorse, where her daughter attends Takine Elementary, which voted in favor of joining the board. She's excited that schools under the board can incorporate more Indigenous language instruction and on-the-land learning into their curriculum.
So I think having a lot more cultural programming embedded throughout all classes, throughout the school, throughout all grades, and not just an add-on for like a culture camp week.
The board is open to all students. Schools under the board will have greater control over things like hiring of staff and managing funding provided by the Department of Education. St. Elias Community School in Hangs Junction will also be joining the board.
There's a lot of elation in the community. There's a lot of...
Steve Smith is the chief of Champagne and Ajax First Nations in Hangs Junction. He's looking forward to his community having more control over their children's education.
Well, I think the biggest thing is a lot more say in how our children will be educated moving into the future.
The board will be up and running for the 2022-23 school year. Next steps include electing board trustees.
You want to go down this big slide?
Wallington says it's a great step forward for the territory.
I think it's a long overdue step, and it's time that First Nations communities had a real voice in how their children are educated and what programming happens at the school.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Fun-looking slide. This week in British Columbia, a panel of judges ruled in favor of logging company Teal Jones, granting an injunction extension in the old-growth logging dispute on Vancouver Island. A lawyer representing protesters is concerned with the decision. APTN's Lee Wilson has more.
Since May 2020, protest groups have been blocking an area known as Fairy Creek to protect old growth. On Wednesday, the BC Court of Appeal extended Teal Jones's injunction against blockades in the area on Vancouver Island for 1 year. The decision reverses a BC Supreme Court decision in September not to grant the extension due to infringement of civil liberties of the protesters by police. In October, a temporary injunction was in place until the Court of Appeal hearing. There have been over 1,100 arrests in the area. Charlotte Chamberlain, legal counsel for the protesters, says they are concerned with the decision.
We're concerned that the Court of Appeal's decision may not adequately protect the right to protest legally against the old growth logging at Fairy Creek and the surrounding areas. We received the decision on Wednesday, so we're still in the process of reviewing the decision to determine our next steps.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Time to step aside for a quick break. Still to come, why some Indigenous people are slow to get the third jab.
I think as well, there's definitely some fatigue.
Welcome back. The federal government gave an update on how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting First Nations on Thursday. This included why some First Nations people are being slower to get their booster shot. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
According to an Indigenous Services press conference, a total of 86% of people 12 and older living in First Nations, Inuit, and territorial communities have received a second dose of COVID vaccine. But there are now 6,851 people in First Nations infected with the Omicron variant and 5,509 active cases, according to health officials. Just under 600 people have died from COVID-19 since the pandemic began. One of the government's top doctors also addressed why there appears to be a lag in some communities getting booster shots.
We have some younger populations who are slower to get to the booster simply because of the recommendations from NACI and because a large part of our focus at the beginning was on older populations where there is more risk. I think as well, there's definitely some fatigue.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Voter suppression and disenfranchisement. Those were some of the terms being used in relation to various situations affecting Indigenous voters in the federal riding of Kenora this past election. On Election Day, polling stations were not set up in a number of First Nations in the Northern Ontario riding. A post-mortem on the election will be tabled in Parliament on January 31st. For more, we spoke earlier with the Chief Electoral Officer of Elections Canada, Stéphane Perreault. Mr. Perreault, good to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be there. Thank you.
As we mentioned, a number of First Nations did not even have polling stations on Election Day in this previous election. What were you hearing from Indigenous voters post-election?
Well, we certainly heard quite a few complaints about the situation in Kenora. I have to say, as Chief Electoral Officer, that is not something that I want to see and hear. And I do want to, first of all, I regret sincerely the service breakdowns in various parts of Kenora. And I do apologize for those electors who were not able to cast their ballot on polling day.
What did the investigation determine happened in the Kenora riding with the missing polling stations?
Well, there's a number of things that happen, and many of them can be looked at as, small and a number of insulated incidents. But I think there are some important broader lessons to be learned. We can talk about communications breakdown. You can talk about errors that are made in canceling the poll and switching over. But the reality is, I think when you take a step back, there are more systemic issues that need to be addressed.
Can you speak to some of those systemic issues?
Yeah, I think there are two things that come out of that from my perspective. Certainly the first thing that comes out is the need to improve the service offering for advance vote for First Nation electors. The model that we have right now does not work for people who live in remote and sparsely populated areas, and that certainly adversely affects First Nation communities more than any other. We have a model right now where it's 4 days of advance polls, and because it's hard to recruit for 4 days, often enough you'll have people in sparsely populated areas that are assigned to polling stations for advance polls that are very far from where they live. In fact, they don't have advance polls. Now, if we have a better service offering, and it doesn't have to be 4 days, we can change the service model for 1 day or 2 days. If we have planned advanced service models, we would not have had the kind of mistakes we saw in Kenora. The returning officer would not have been asked to change the situation. He would have not have canceled polling day the way he did. It was a good faith error, but it was an error nonetheless. So there are ways to avoid that. We need to improve our service offerings. So that's the first thing, certainly for advanced polls. We also need to have a better understanding of the realities of First Nation communities. And to do that, we need to engage on a long-term basis, not just during an election. We need to work on those relationships, and that will also help us recruit from First Nation communities. So I think that's a longer-term goal. It's not something that we'll achieve in a day. So there are short-term things that we can do. We can improve the service offering, and we have to work on the longer term on the engagement side.
We often hear or are told, that your vote is one of the most important things you have. Has anybody been disciplined over what happened here?
Look, the important thing is to move forward and to find solutions. The returning officer has indicated that he is retiring, and we see that as an opportunity to recruit, hopefully from members of the community. And I think we have solutions for the future to improve the situation.
So no disciplinary action then?
I think the question is as theoretical. As I said, the returning officer is moving on.
Well, Mr. Perot, we look forward to seeing what happens next time around and hope that things go a lot smoother. Certainly appreciate you taking some time for us here.
It's my pleasure, and I certainly hope you'll have a better experience as an elector on polling day next time around, whatever that is. Thank you.
Now, for much more on what unfolded during the last federal election in the Kenora riding, you can watch Christopher Reed's APTN Investigates episode on the matter called Disenfranchised. You can find that over on our website, aptnnews.ca. Well, a new episode of APTN Investigates debuts tonight. We'll speak with the reporter behind the dock after the break. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Today's photo comes to us from loyal viewer Greg Scriber. Greg was able to capture a moment of this northern hawk owl in Ottawa, Ontario. If you're careful, Greg, it looks like he's taking a photo of you. Beautiful picture. Thanks for that, Greg, and thanks to all of our viewers for contributing. You can submit a photo by sending it to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Time now to take a look at your Saturday weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +6 with snow in Halifax, 1 above in St. John's. -21 in Kahnawake, 22 below, sun out in Nain. -12 with snow in Montreal, sunny, and 21 below for Chibougamau. -9 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, 14 below in North Bay. Snow and -9 in Thunder Bay, 14 below and snow in Sioux Lookout. -18 for God's Lake and Norway House. -15 in Gimli with snow, 13 below and snow in Winnipeg. Sunny and -3 for Regina, -4 in Saskatoon. -4 in Meadow Lake, cloudy and 5 below in Buffalo Narrows. Over in northern Alberta, -5 in Fort McMurray, +3 in Grand Prairie. 4 above in Edmonton, sunny and 8 for Lethbridge and Calgary. +5 with snow in Victoria, 6 above in Vancouver. +1 in Prince George, snow, and +2 in Dease Lake. -35 for Old Crow, snow and -1 in Whitehorse. Minus 21 with snow for Yellowknife. 26 below in Norman Wells. Minus 22 for Sax Harbor. Snow and 27 below in Paulatuck. Minus 32 in Chesterfield. 31 below for Whale Cove and Baker Lake. Minus 26 in Resolute. Minus 32 with snow in Joe Haven. APTN Investigates returns tonight with part 1 of a 2-part series on missing and murdered Indigenous men. Brittany Guillot visits the Highway of Tears and meets 3 families who have all lost loved ones. Brittany joins us now. Brittany, thanks for being with us. Can you tell us a bit about what you found with your investigation?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I came across a national database for missing persons in the United States and found that out of all missing Indigenous people, approximately 70% are men and boys. These are statistics that are indicative of a larger problem going on. And so I wanted to see how this compares to Canada. And as I came to find out, statistics and information on missing and murdered Indigenous boys is hard to come by. There is no national database available. So I began compiling basic information on missing and murdered Indigenous men and boys across the country. And what I found is that there are over 600 missing and murdered Indigenous men. Now academics and families are saying that that number is likely much larger.
What has been the response from some of the families?
So we spoke with a number of families in Prince George. We spoke to the mother of Colton Fleury, he's a 16-year-old boy who went missing from a downtown motel. We also spoke with Lucas Daggerness's aunt and uncle. He was last seen at his high school. And we also spoke with the family of Barry Seymour, who was last seen in a trailer park courtyard. And every single family member wants more done for missing and murdered Indigenous men and boys in Canada. They have all said that they believe a national inquiry is needed to address the growing number.
Well, Brittany, it's a really important work. Looking forward to seeing the documentary tonight. Appreciate you taking some time for us.
Great, thank you so much.
You can watch part 1 of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Men tonight in just a couple minutes' time here. Part 2 will air right here next week. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Friday. For news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have yourself a great night.